hottest debates. Do you
Okay,
not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Gloria Meets. First up this evening, it's Shadow Health Secretary, Labour's West Streeting.
He had taken my mum's younger sister, dangled her over a balcony by her ankles and threatened to drop her unless my mum stayed in that relationship.
Former Conservative Cabinet Minister George Eustice.
I do think there is such a thing as a maternal instinct, and I think it's wrong to deny it.
Shadow Business Minister, Labour's Seema Malhotra.
Consumers are paying a lot more than they should for goods because of these fake reviews, but also subscription traps.
All that after your news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are your top stories from the GB newsroom. The grandmother of a boy killed by police in Paris during a traffic stop is urging protesters to end the riots. The French government's holding crisis talks this evening to address the civil unrest after a 5th night of violence. Nahel Mazouk's grandmother says rioters are using his death as an excuse to cause havoc. The family has called for calm. The city's regional president, Valérie Pécresse, says she's confident order will be restored.
What's happening is ultra-violence by small groups of people that are very well organized and very well trained, and they want to defy the Republic. And the Republic will not yield, and we will fight back.
The regional president also met a mayor whose home was ram-raided and set alight in a Parisian suburb. His wife and one of his children were hurt. Prosecutors say an attempted murder investigation has now been opened. French journalist Antonin André says it's put more pressure on President Emmanuel Macron.
His family were attacked in his house during the night, and his wife and his 2 children had to left the house in emergency because there was fire in the house. And this is what is a very shocking thing this morning, and every mayors in France wants that the state and Emmanuel Macron take more measures to stop the chaos.
2 people have been killed in a mass shooting in the US state of Maryland. Police say up to 30 people suffered gunshot wounds. 3 are in a critical condition. The attack happened in the city of Baltimore, where people had gathered for an event called Brooklyn Day. The suspect or suspects are reportedly still at large. The US President will meet King Charles and the Prime Minister when he visits the UK next week. Buckingham Palace has confirmed Joe Biden will visit Windsor Castle on the 10th of July. The White House says he's travelling to London to strengthen the close relationship between the nations. He'll then head to Lithuania for the NATO summit before going to Finland. New measures to deal with disruptive demonstrations have come into force. They include expanded police powers to move on static or slow-walking protests like those used by Just Stop Oil. A criminal offence to tackle disruption in tunnels has also been introduced, carrying jail terms of up to 3 years. Critics say the laws threaten the right to protest. Meanwhile, 5 Just Stop Oil activists have been charged with behaviour likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. They were arrested for disrupting London's Pride March yesterday. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now it's time for Gloria Meets.
So, Gloria, thanks for coming in and talking about...
Don't do that. That's alarming. It's made me very emotionally sort of concentrated.
So tell me about what you thought of the book.
This is a great book. Shall I start?
Yeah, good.
Shadow Health Secretary, Labour's Wes Streeting. We're recording on the Thursday. It's going out on Sunday, but it's the evening of your book launch. We're here at your old school. It's a great book.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. So you're born to teenage parents. You grew up on a council estate, you experienced poverty, you had grandparents in prison. That is a hell of a list. You make it to Cambridge University and you're a very senior politician now. Do you still think of yourself as working class?
Yes, to an extent. I'm very proud of my background. I think I always describe myself as having a working class background. But I'm under no illusion, not least because there are a lot of my family whose lives are better off than they were in the early years described in the book, but still struggle to get by. I'm not going to pretend that being a member of Parliament on the salary that I earn, with the level of security that I have for the first time in my life, that my life is the same as it was then, or that I have the same challenges as, say, my mum who works as a cleaner. There are lots of people in my family, like my dad, who've managed to work hard, get on the housing ladder and sort of work their way up, who, you know, when my dad would still say, I think he's working class. I don't think your class ever leaves you in a way, and I'm very proud of my roots, even though, as I often say, in terms of my work as a politician, I don't want kids to grow up experiencing the same sort of poverty and hardships that I experienced growing up. Certainly my mum and her side of the family experienced growing up. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm in politics, because I want to make sure that kids from backgrounds like mine have the same chances and choices and opportunities and security that I have now.
We both had the experience of being on free school meals. I remember having to stand in a different school queue just because I was a free school meal kid. It was humiliating. I don't know if you have any of those stories.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, exactly the same. In primary school, it was a leveller, so mums and dads would hand in the dinner money at the reception on the Monday morning. Those of us who didn't have to pay and we got free school meals, you wouldn't tell the difference. No one knew who was in and out of the office, and when you went into the school hall, you all got your dinners together. When I came to this school, the big shock for me was a big long queue to get into the school hall, and then once you get there, I was put into a different queue, and it was straight away I thought, oh my God, I'm in the poor kids queue basically. And when you're trying to fit in and make new friends and think about first impressions, I just felt like I was standing under these massive flashing neon lights saying, hello, we're the poor kids. And that stigma hasn't, I feel it viscerally. And in fact, the irony of this book, in a way, is that the sort of 12, 13-year-old me here at this school would never have wanted to tell any of these stories. And it's taken me about 30 years to be in a position where I feel able to share this story. I must say it's the most terrifying thing I've done in my life, because as politicians, you're not supposed to show vulnerability. You know, I'm very protective of my family, and as people find when they read it, this is not just my story. In fact, it's very much my parents' story, my grandparents' story. It's warts and all, and there are lots of painful family stories in there. And while I've done it with their permission, their blessing, I couldn't have written this book without their full support, and I wouldn't have written it without their full support. I'm still nervous because when people pick up books and they talk about characters, these are real people. And so I feel, yes, I'm very excited but very nervous about sharing some of these stories.
Your mum and dad split up when you were a baby. When you're about 2 years old, she gets together with a man called Lenny. I read the book. He is a violent, controlling brute, your words. When she broke up with him, he held her hostage for 24 hours and ended up in prison for what he did to your mum nearly 40 years ago. There'll be women that go through that same experience now. Men still beating up their wives and girlfriends, murdering them in some cases. You were very, very young, but I just wondered if that experience had taught you anything about how we deal with that sort of, I don't know if you can call it masculinity.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't call it masculinity. That was one of there are a few things in the book that I found very hard to write about, as in this case as a son, in other cases as a grandson. I don't remember any of it because I was too young. As I was writing about it, the main thing I just thought was how incredibly courageous my mum must have been. Because now, like, you look at the statistics, most men who hit women, beat women, rape women, don't even see the inside of a courtroom, let alone the inside of a prison cell. So for my mum to have escaped that controlling relationship, had the courage to go to the police, to see it through to the court with her younger sister, who I think was barely a teenager, and at one point he had such a control that he had taken my mum's younger sister, dangled her over a balcony by her ankles and threatened to drop her unless my mum stayed in that relationship. So when you have that sort of threat, not just to yourself but to the people you love hanging over you, I cannot imagine what my mum must have gone through. And it was one of the times in my life where my mum actually handed me over to my dad and his dad, my granddad, because, you know, although no harm did come to me, she was worried that it would. And I cannot imagine what she would have been going through and the courage she showed. And, you know, honestly, 40 years later, is the criminal justice system in a much better place? I can't honestly say that it is. And I think we've got to do two things. One is toughen up the criminal justice system. So whether it's in the course of the police investigation or the process that women go through to see a case through to prosecution, the speed at which it goes through to see through a prosecution, we've got to make improvements there. But frankly, when it comes to violence against women and girls, this isn't a problem for women to solve, it's a problem for us to solve as men. And that starts with boys. And even in my own borough today, I'm astonished at the stories that primary and secondary school girls tell me about the catcalling, the wolf whistling, the unwarranted touching that takes place. And it's got to start there. And this is cultural, it's systemic, it's hard, but it's our responsibility to fix.
Right, your granddad, working class Tory. Your dad, working class Tory, worked all their life, prided themselves on never taking a penny in benefits. Still a common view today. Lots of working class people think Labour is all about benefits rather than work. Loads of graduates vote Labour, lots of working class people vote Tory. Do you understand working class Tories? Because you...
Yeah, because I grew up with them. And I'm not sure what's a bigger disappointment to my dad that I ended up being a Labour MP or supporting Arsenal. My dad is actually he's gone off the Tories a bit, actually, I think, like lots of Tories have. I'm not sure how he's going to vote at the next election, but
really?
He's not happy.
Really? So he's still, even when he's someone became an MP.
The only time my dad has voted Labour was for me in a council election when I still lived.
But at parliamentary, he would still vote.
I think he's voted Green as a protest vote. You'd have to ask him. But it does give me a window though into why people, because I think Labour is fundamentally for the working class. We were established by the trade union movement, by the Labour movement, to give a voice, representation and a government for the majority, not just the privileged few. Yeah. And over time, we've lost a lot of working class support. I mean, actually, to be fair, there's always been a chunk of working class voters who voted the Conservatives, and I think Mrs Thatcher in particular had an appeal that spoke to my granddad and my dad. So I've always understood it, and I've always understood the obstacles that often stop people voting Labour. It's the same questions: can we trust you with the money? Can we trust you on law and order? Can we trust you on national security? And Labour has always won when we've had leaders who've got us to a place where the answer to those questions is yes, and I think Keir will be one of those leaders. But there's always that difficulty. The benefits thing is really interesting, because again, I see it from both sides. My granddad, my dad, very proud of the fact they've never claimed a penny in benefits. And I remember when my dad left his job as a publican, he worked all of the hours he could on a building site during the day, mini-cabbing by night, to make sure that, because at the time I was living with my dad and he was a single dad, to make sure that we had a roof over our head. When I was growing up, especially living with my mum, that benefit system and that welfare safety net was vital. Sometimes it put food in the fridge and money in the electric meter when we didn't have it. And today, I think that there are people like my dad going out to work all the hours they can every day who still don't have enough money at the end of the month, at the end of the week, at the end of the day to make ends meet. Something's gone wrong. We've broken the link between a hard day's work and a fair day's pay. And for me, social security should always be exactly that, a safety net and a springboard back to work. There will always be some people who genuinely can't work. Yeah. And of course, those people should receive the income they need to live a decent life. But, you know, the Labour Party is a party of labour. It implies work, and I'm, proud to come from a working class family.
Okay. God, we're running out of time. It's absolutely fascinating. I just want to get a quick answer for you on this. You know, when sometimes people in the Labour Party, they wear those "Never Kissed a Tory" hat.
Yeah. I have worn one of those "Never Kissed a Tory" t-shirts. I'm not entirely sure it's true. But there'll be some Tories at my launch party. I've got friends in the Tory party. I've got family who vote Tory. For me, politics is a battle of ideas, not a battle of personalities. And as much as they drive me up the wall, I think there are lots of MPs in the House of Commons who are genuinely in it for the right reasons. And at a time when there's a lot of cynicism about us, it's worth saying that most politicians are in it for the right reasons, even if the minority give the majority a bad name.
Okay. You're a gay man. You realised this in adolescence. You thought of it as a secret that you couldn't tell anyone. That changed when you went to university. You describe a deep sense of shame running through your adolescent years. You're a Christian and you write that you feared going to hell. Isn't there something wrong with a religion that made you feel like that?
Well, that's a deep question. How am I going to answer this quickly? I think it took me a long time to reconcile those two things, and I am now at peace with being a gay Christian. And I genuinely think that I am the way that I was made. In this question of choice, I spent many years choosing not to be gay and desperately trying not to be gay. And it was painful. And it was only when I came out I felt this feeling of enormous liberation, like the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulders, and finally recognised the person looking back at me in the mirror. And it was this happy, joyful feeling. I just thought, this is who I am. This is how I've been made. In a country where we're free to disagree and believe different things, and in a constituency that I represent that's very religious, there are lots of people who hold what I would describe as a mainstream orthodox view that homosexuality is sinful. That's what makes life difficult for those of us who are religious and gay. But I am reconciled theologically that we're made in God's image. I think that to be gay and Christian is not contradictory. And the thing I find really sad is that a lot of people, when they think of religion, think bigotry, exclusion, you're not welcome here. And certainly in the case of my religion, but I think it applies to others, I think the message of Christianity is about love, loving your neighbour, standing up against injustice, and not walking by on the other side. And when I look at what faith communities do in my constituency in terms of things like homelessness and hunger, I think faith motivates so much good. But often when people read about politicians being religious, they think, are you going to vote against a woman's right to choose? Are you going to vote against LGBT equality? Are you going to vote against my rights? And people can look at my voting record. I've got a very liberal voting record, actually, but it makes me sad because I think religion is a very positive force for good. But I totally understand why people don't see it that way. And I think that's on us as religious people. And we're meant to be going out there and building a bigger tent and bringing people to our faith. And I think actually there's a lot of prejudice that pushes people away, and I find that sad.
I'm gutted that we've run out of time, really. I could have so much more to discuss, but I feel really pleased that I read this book. I think your family are amazing, Wes.
Thank you,
I really
appreciate
think
that.
you've got the most incredible parents and grandparents, and they must be so incredibly proud of you.
Yeah, I really
so
appreciate
here's
that.
to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes Streeting. Coming up, George Eustice.
And it culminated with me at the age of just 22, acting as litigant in person in the High Court in Bristol to try to defend our family.
Seema Malhotra.
And if the business isn't doing well, nor is the family income. I found out later because your parents never taught you about these things.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
George Eustice, elected as a Conservative MP in 2010. You've been a Cabinet Minister. You're not standing at the next general election. Why not?
Well, I will have done 25 years in politics by the time of the next election, and I think that's enough for anyone, really. It was 15 years in Parliament as an MP, 9 years as a minister, all of them in one department. But before that, of course, I did 10 years as an advisor and a campaigner. So it'll be 25 years in total. I don't regret any moment of it. I've had a fascinating time in politics. It's had its frustrations and it's had its ups and downs. But I want the chance to pursue a different career, in the sort of final chapter, if you like, of my working career. I'll be 53. I think I'm young enough still to do something else.
What will you least miss about politics or about being in Parliament?
Elections. I think I find, and I've done elections as an advisor and a press secretary, and I've done elections as an MP. I find them exhausting and infuriating because actually, for whichever party you're standing for, you wake up every morning and there's some terrible injustice that's been dished out on you, something said that's grossly unfair from your point of view, at least. And you get the blame for lots of things that aren't your fault. And they are grueling, exhausting ventures. And I won't miss another election. Indeed, one of the main reasons I decided to go this time is having fought 5 elections, quite a few referendums along the way as well. I really couldn't face doing another general election. And I thought I just had to be honest with my constituency association about that.
Is there any chance of a majority Conservative government after the next election?
Yes, there is, but we've got an uphill struggle. And so it will be the first time in history that a party has won 5 consecutive elections in a row. Now, of course, we've had more elections than you would expect to have over the last 12, 15 years for various reasons that we're all familiar with. And I think there is a route for us to get back, but it needs Rishi Sunak to basically stick to the plan he's doing. It's hard work, but getting credible, sensible decisions made, showing good judgment, evening the keel, if you like, getting the economy back on an even keel. If we do all of that, then I think doubts might start to set in about Keir Starmer and the Labour front bench, because I personally don't think they really look like a government in waiting at the moment. And that's different from Tony Blair. Tony Blair in the late 90s very much looked like a prime minister and a government in waiting. And I don't think the Labour Party look like that at the moment. Now, there's a lot of ifs in there, but it's doable. And of course, the hope of the Conservative Party is it'll be more of a 1992 election from our point of view rather than a 1997 election.
Was there a life event that politicised you?
Yes, I never intended actually to go into politics. I always had a bit of an interest in it when I was at school, but I actually intended to go into the family business, which was farming. We used to do quite a lot of soft fruit and vegetables, and we had livestock as well. It was quite a big farming business in those days in Cornwall. And we had a really big setback for the business in the mid-1990s. I was in the business in my early 20s at that time. And we ended up making a big investment in a new project. And then several years of very bad weather, a lot of bad luck, a lot of things went against us. To be honest, with hindsight, it was an overambitious project that we had taken on, but we did so to try and keep an old family farm in the family when my great uncle was retiring. But as a result of that, we ended up in a very serious dispute with Barclays Bank, who was our banker at the time. And that episode became, quite an acrimonious case, a test case on several fronts. And in the course of a year, there were about 27 different court orders, multiple court appearances. And it culminated with me at the age of just 22, acting as litigant in person in the High Court in Bristol to try to defend our family against, what was quite an aggressive move by the bank. And so that politicised me, and I became very politicised because of that. And I also blamed the exchange rate mechanism, which you might remember, ERM was the forerunner to the euro. And that also made me quite hostile to ventures to try to join up currencies in the EU. And it's no surprise, therefore, that my first job in politics was with Business for Sterling, the business campaign group to try to stop Britain joining the euro.
And in that campaign, you worked with Dominic Cummings, who was not a household name at that point, but went on to become Boris Johnson's chief advisor. They spectacularly fell out. Does Dominic Cummings' personality lend itself to falling out with people who's been very close to?
Well, look, Dominic Cummings and I, it was our first for both of us. We're the same age, actually, exactly the same age. I think there's only a few months between us. And for both of us, Working at Business for Sterling was where we cut our teeth. It was our first job in politics. And on some ways, Dominic Cummings is a force of nature, and his ability to analyse things and be quite strategic, particularly in campaigns, in difficult battles, was actually very impressive. But his big weakness is he doesn't really work with others all that well. If you're part of the team, and he'll normally travel light with half a dozen really trusted people that he bonds with on a particular mission, and I was one of those during those years. If you're one of those, then you're part of the group, and you really understand how Dominic operates. But of course, in politics, you endlessly have to try to accommodate and be nice to people that have different views from you. It's about consensus building. And consensus building is not something that Dominic Cummings was ever, minded to do. His view, his perception, and I understand it, would have been that if you compromise to reach a consensus, then you've already undermined the purity and the clarity of your mission. And therefore, compromise wasn't something he did easily, and that makes it quite difficult when you get to government, because he wasn't willing to do that.
More from George Eustace after the break.
The approach we take to animal welfare and the way we treat sentient animals, particularly farm animals, is actually the hallmark of a civilised society.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
News channel.
I just want to ask you about some comments you made in Parliament a couple of months ago in March, and these comments caused a bit of a stir. You said, many women do want to spend those first few years with their child. It's a short period in life where they can perform that natural nurturing role. We shouldn't belittle it, we should value it. Natural nurturing role. Bit of a backlash, people saying just because you're a woman, it doesn't mean you're natural and nurturing, and that's a stereotype. Were you surprised by the backlash?
Well, yes, because actually the point I was making in that speech, I was arguing the case for a transferable tax allowance. And the reality is that in most cases, the partner in a relationship that chooses to stay at home in those first few years is women. And that's a fact. It's not exclusively the case. And of course, there are men who decide to stay at home and care for children as well. But it's also the case that when parents drop their children at playgroups or childcare, they will find that most of the people who work in those places are also women. And again, there's no surprise about that. And I think it's wrong to belittle those women who do decide that they want to stay behind and play that nurturing role. And at the moment, there's a big problem with our tax system, which is if one parent chooses to stay at home for the first few years because they want those first 3 or 4 years to be with their child, not only do they obviously have no support for doing so, but they lose their tax allowance. And my idea is that they should, in those early years, be able to transfer their tax allowance to a working partner. And it might be the working partner, might be the woman or the man in the relationship. But it would mean then that the family unit would have more of their income that they earn to help with those costs that they have in childcare. But this is I stumbled into the very contentious debate. The gender debate, highly charged gender debate that we have in this country. But I stand by what I said, and I used the term motherhood for a good reason, because I do think there is such a thing as a maternal instinct, and I think it's wrong to deny it.
Who do you think, the word belittle, that the role, a caring role, obviously this is contested, but let's assume that women have choose a caring role, and you said it shouldn't be belittled. Who do you think belittles it?
I think there's a culture in our society that says you should get back to work straight away, and stay-at-home mum is almost seen as a term of abuse. Actually, I think it is in that sense by some sectors of our society belittled, and I had lots of parents who had chosen to stay at home who contacted me. The vast majority of people who contacted me completely supported what I said, and there was one mother I heard about who said that she when a child was born, she was asked what to put as her occupation on the on the birth certificate, and she said, "Well, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mother." And then the person, the registrar, said, "Well, what did you do before you were a mother?" And she said what career she'd done a couple of years before, and they said, "Well, we'll put that down." And it was almost as though they thought, "We're doing you a favour by putting your former career on, rather than valuing the role that you've declared you're passionate about and want to do."
You go round the house.
Actually, we carve it out quite well, and I have at weekends I look after my young daughter, and I'm usually the first one she wakes up in the morning, so I get her breakfast and keep her entertained. I do most of the cooking in the house, but we share it around. So I'm not, as usual, because I'm a Conservative MP, tendency to me to be caricatured as some sort of misogynist or something in some people's eyes. It's a completely false caricature, actually.
Just a little bit about the brief that you held. Well, you really are an expert in that department of food, rural affairs, the environment, because you were a minister for so long, as well as being the Secretary of State. The weekly food shop, it's hurting us all. The cost of that weekly food shop. Is there any government policy that could help get those prices down?
When the price of oil and gas goes up, because it's linked to fertiliser and most of the inputs in agricultural costs and food distribution, then it's very, very sensitive to energy costs. And that's the prime driver. And there's a time lag in that those costs come through the system typically 3 to 6 months after the price of oil. And that's why they're quite stubbornly high at the moment. They will start to fall back. But there are other things the government could do. They could loosen and change the approach on immigration. I think having a skills-based immigration policy is actually wrong, because it means you're opening the door to solicitors, accountants, insolvency practitioners, orchestra conductors, all sorts of people that we actually don't particularly need at the moment. But what you're then saying is those sectors who are producing food for the nation can't have access to the labour that they need. And that's driving both a labour shortage and wage inflation as well in those sectors. And that's exacerbating the problem. So it's not the cause of it, but it's a big contributing factor. And the one thing the government could do is to basically carve out and say, food is different. We are going to have a temporary visa scheme, maybe with a 2 or 3 year visa for anybody who wants to work in the food industry.
And just on another important issue in the department that you have spent most time working in, animal welfare. There's a few issues where people in your own party, not just the opposition and campaigners, wish they had gone further and faster, thought Brexit would be an opportunity to do so. Any disappointments in that area?
Yes, I all my time I've been passionate about animal welfare. The approach we take to animal welfare and the way we treat sentient animals, particularly farm animals, is actually the hallmark of a civilized society. And I've always felt we could do better. And there should be a constant effort to improve animal welfare legislation. And there were other bills still to be brought forward. One of them was the Kept Animals Bill that had a package of measures, including the ban on live exports, which was something we wanted to do and was a Brexit benefit. And sadly, the government have decided not to take that forward. And I think that's a great shame. And they did so because they see animal welfare as a contentious issue. They were worried there would be all sorts of emotive amendments and it would be difficult to manage. The truth is, though, we had already planned for that. I developed, as the minister responsible, a handling strategy and a management strategy for any conceivable amendments that could have been made to the bill. So I'm very disappointed the government didn't take it forward, but we are where we are, and we'll now have to try and pick up some of those measures in other ways, such as private members' bills.
Might you do that?
I might do that, but there'll be a bit of me that thinks I did all the work before and we could have just done this with an extra 5 hours of time in Parliament, of which there's plenty of times when Parliament disappears home early, so it could have been done. And it was really only, I think, sort of excessive caution and sensitivity to the risk of emotive issues that caused them to delay it.
Really enjoyed that chat. Really enjoyed getting the benefit of your wisdom, particularly in that department that you spent so much time in, and wish you well for the next chapter. Whenever that election comes, when do you think it'll be?
I can't see really an incentive for government to go particularly early at the moment. So I still think probably October next year, 2024.
We'll put it in our diaries. George Eustace, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, Seema Malhotra.
What people underestimate when you have a member of the family that's got, terminal illness or life-changing illness is how much it takes from the rest of the family.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Labour MP Seema Malhotra, you were on the front bench, you're Shadow Minister for Business and Consumers. Your dad ran a family shop. I read that he sold everything from school uniforms to jewellery. Did the experience of living in the family shop, did it influence how you come up with policies to support small businesses?
The experience of growing up in a small shop in our community really did influence me, and it's a set of memories that I still have. We grew up as a family of 8, 5 children, my parents and my grandmother living above the shop. So it was something that we had in our lives every day. And it was an experience where I really do think it gave me a sense of being on the front line in a community. You know, people came in to buy the school uniforms or to buy thread from our Gutermann, rack, if people remember Gutermann thread.
No.
But also, well, it's funny, we still have the rack in the garage. But it was one of those experiences where you really were in the community. People young and old came in. It was where I learned to go out and about with my father, because he was like an old-fashioned salesman as well. He was importing jewellery and clothes from India. So he used to have a suitcase that he used to put in the boot of the car and go out to shops in Leatherhead and Guildford and really show his samples and get orders. And I used to sometimes go with him as like a 5 or 6-year-old. And equally in the shop, when we were serving customers, I remember my mum testing me on my arithmetic when I had to calculate how much change to give the customer when they give us 50p and it was for 37p. All those experiences I think are really significant, because they do remind me of what it was like to live in a shop. I never thought about it much at the time, but it was there day and night. We never really got away. Family income and business income is really interconnected, an issue that I see a lot today. And if the business isn't doing well, nor is the family income. I found out later, because your parents never taught you about these things, but we were almost always overdrawn. It's the reason why, we never had a family holiday when we were young. In fact, our family holiday was a day trip to the seaside on the August bank holiday. And we used to make a packed lunch in the morning, and it would be this whole exciting thing where we would go off for a few hours. My dad would pick a different seaside that we hadn't been to before. And I never thought about it, but that was our reality. I was one of those kids that probably didn't go outside of the square mile in which they lived. And the way in which a small business and running that in a community really takes the whole of the family and is part of your life is one of the reasons why I think we need to take family businesses and community businesses and their needs so much more seriously, because they are on the front line and they do need government support. And they ought to be, in my view, at the heart of any plan for growth of our high streets and our communities.
And you have the word consumers in your job title. Now, any consumer right now is feeling ripped off every time they leave the house, open a bill. How are you going to help them?
Consumers are right to feel ripped off, and we have got a government under which we have seen a weakening of consumer protections. If you take as one example the cuts to trading standards teams, you've seen a cuts of over 50%. If you look at some of the challenges we've got right now, new challenges of vapes on our high streets that are, a third of which are not meeting the current tobacco regulations. This is in part because we've got porous borders. We do not have the checks that we need. We do not have the infrastructure. Therefore, we've got unsafe products in our communities. But also the issues come wider than that, because when you go online, as a lot of people do with their shopping online, there are major issues with things like fake reviews, where people are buying products that aren't what they are expected to be. They don't have that consumer experience. The government's been far too slow at bringing in fake reviews, and the new bill that's coming into Parliament now that I'm working on, the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Bill, I absolutely believe has to tackle that issue, because consumers are paying a lot more than they should for goods because of these fake reviews. But also subscription traps. I mean, which estimates that, or in Citizens Advice, that this could be costing over £300 million a year in people buying products that they don't want. And there's got to be a tightening up of those rules, like in the way that Labour's called for, so you have much more opt-in rather than being, opting out, having to cancel. So things should be done with people's permission, with transparency, and we need much more clarity over and certainty over how people are being charged and protection for consumers around that.
Now, we started this interview by talking about your dad. He is no longer with us. He had cancer, died nearly a decade ago. What sort of caring role did you have towards the end of his life, I guess?
Well, I had caring roles both for my father in his cancer, but also my mother, who had 3 strokes, and she passed away last year. I think what people underestimate when you have a member of the family that's got terminal illness or life-changing illness is how much it takes from the rest of the family, how much you have to juggle your work and your time and your energy and your own family commitments. And I remember when he was diagnosed, when the family's told, there was a lot of time that went in trying to make life just a bit easier for my father and my mother, taking him to the hospital appointments, juggling that with being in Parliament. I would yo-yo sometimes twice a day, which means go from the constituency to Parliament and back and then into Parliament. And when we had late night votes and so on, I would, if he was in hospital, be going into hospital on my way back, whether it was 9 or 10 at night, just to check up on how things were, and just say goodnight, some of the basics. And I think at those times you also have to take care of the partner. My mum stopped looking after herself because she's so focused on my dad, and in some ways that cumulative impact over a period of months led to some of their health conditions that also led to her strokes in due course. And so the way in which we have to think about care, in my view, and the way we have to think about having some greater flexibility to reduce the stress on the carers with the work they still have to do and the work they still want to do is really important for how we design a care system that's fit for the workforce and the society that we have today and of tomorrow. I think with slightly different experience with my mother with her strokes, and that was much more intense. When it came to, her last days, I think it was very different because she had to be at home with 24/7 care. And so this was at the start of last year, where you're having to set up people who are strangers going into your family home, your parents' home, with your mum on her own, and suddenly faced with a bill of £8,000 a month because you have to pay for that care day and night. And, you know, for the first 6 weeks after, you know, the
How much? Did you say that?
it was £8,000 a month that was the bill. And that was including me doing overnight 3 nights a week, and then other family members coming in for a few hours. But £8,000 wouldn't be unheard of for a month, and that's with extra family support because you have day and night care. And so it was juggling that and making sure that she was on board with it all. It became very stressful for her because, you know, she knew it was, you know, it's my dad's savings that was going towards her care. But it was very stressful on top of everything else to know how much it was costing. So I think beyond that, it was also, how do you trust people who are coming in? Some of them were new, then there was instability with the workforce, the retraining, the making sure they've got cultural awareness as well, how she likes her food, what the different food is, and so on. So many things need to be taken into account for a proper care system in our country. But it taught me a great deal. I'm very fortunate I had the chance to look after them in their final days, but it does really take a whole family to look after someone, you know, when they're older, and a whole health system that needs to be geared up to really understand the needs, not just of the older person, but also the families.
You're of Indian descent. Have you ever experienced racism in your life?
I have experienced racism in my life. We are of Indian heritage, but I was born in Hammersmith and grew up in Hounslow. And look, there are some experiences that I know young people in my constituency are still facing. This was when we would go down the local high streets. I would expect as a child to be, someone would spit at us, or something would be thrown in our way, or there would be some sort of comment. It happens at bus stops. It happens sometimes in school, and you know, it just, I think, made us as a family just be a little bit more insular. You know, my parents weren't so comfortable with us going out and knowing where we were going and those sorts of things. But and then when you get older, you know, it's still there in different ways. When I got elected in my by-election at the end of 2011, the BNP stood a candidate, and they had a big lorry on Feltham High Street where they blared out not to vote for Seema because she's got 2 passports. Now, I've only ever had 1 passport, and it's British, and I was born in Hammersmith Hospital. But what can you do on election day when you have, you know, such hostility and untruths? You know, on the one hand, you know, I was really angry about it. On the other hand, you know, as someone said to me on the day, well, at least you can't hear half of what they're saying, but all people can hear is your name. So, you know, whether it contributed to me getting a bigger majority, I have no idea. But it is, you know, in different ways in my casework that I'm also still seeing racism appearing, whether it's in employment-related issues or crime or hostility between neighbours. Racism is very clear and apparent in so many different ways in our society, and we need a zero tolerance to it.
Now, when I was doing my research, started looking online, and I found out that you share a name with somebody who was in The Real Housewives of Cheshire. Has there ever been any embarrassing moments? Has anybody ever confused you with her?
Well, it's been mostly on Twitter, where occasionally I get tweets saying how great she looks. And look, I'll totally take that one. And just to say that I've never met her, but I've always wanted to.
Brilliant. Seema Malhotra, a pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely to join you.
Thanks for watching. Back next Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. Looking at the week ahead, we'll see rain or showers at times, but there will be some sunshine, particularly towards the end of the week, and temperatures will start to rise as well. We can see that nicely on the bigger picture, quite unsettled at the moment, tightly packed isobars indicating quite a brisk wind at times, and you can see outbreaks of rain. But as we move towards the end of the week, it should settle down a little. So back to Sunday evening, and we continue to have showers across the northern half of the